of Ash and Flo. This is Unbillable Hours, a podcast about professional services marketing. Stick around to listen to our insights, tips, and best practices to improve your firm's marketing and even your career.
Okay.
So welcome back, I guess, or welcome, first place.
Wait, if you're going to start, hold on to welcome back, because I don't know what we're talking about.
Oh, so I wanted to get into growth models. We can have many different words for that. I call it growth models, and how most consultancy marketers do not have one, dare I say it. So growth model is the idea that you at one point in time sit down and figure out what is the actual contribution marketing has to make to a given growth target. Easy version of this is if you want to increase top line revenue, right? Which is usually what it's about. There's other cases where you want to bring up profit margins, but that gets more complicated. But my question to you is, how many marketers have you seen in consulting firms that can, if you go to them and say, what's the revenue growth target for the business you service for this year? And how much contribution does marketing have to make to that? How many would you say can answer that question?
I don't need to talk about consulting marketing here. This is a problem that most marketers, regardless of the kind of company they work in, struggle with. If you're talking about revenue, if you're talking about anything that's numbers, you need a good measurement model.
And here is where I would disagree ever so slightly, because I would say that even if you are not in a position where you can measure all that stuff, then you have all the problems with the attribution in the first place. Like, how do you even define, right? What is marketing influence revenue or source revenue? These are all details which they are important once you start to optimize, because you have the basics in place. But to get the basics in place, I say you don't even need all that. You just need to build on top of some ballpark exercises. And even if the model you get from that is, I would say, wildly off, you would still have the benefit that you would have a model to sort of then realize it's off, which is way better than having nothing in the first place, just shooting in the dark.
So yes, to a certain degree, but here's the thing. When you try to build a model on that, you have this huge area called non-quantifiable costs, okay? And when you have your non-quantifiable costs, what the hell does that mean? Because often what happens is all your cost centers, okay, are contributing to this. All your cost centers, your IT, everything contributes to this. And if you're in a consulting firm, things that affect quote unquote profitability and all that kind of shit will also, fit within it. So you will suddenly find that marketing contributes next to nothing in some cases because it's sitting in that NQC bucket. Or you'd find that marketing has contributed. Everyone knows through word of mouth and stuff that marketing has helped, but there's no way of figuring out in what way it's helped. But the good thing on the second one is your stakeholders know that marketing has helped. So that way, the only thing you need to do is build your measurement, and you've done all your stakeholder education.
So okay, I agree on that that's an issue, but you just give me another thing that you need. So some sort of measurement, some sort of metrics is important, and we can puzzle this together as we go along. So bear with me. But I have a few specific pointers for folks how to start this in my very simplified way. But the other thing you reminded me of, and that is right, is it's also good to have an understanding of just loosely what are we talking about when we say marketing sourced revenue and marketing influence. The influence is that is what you just said. That is very tricky to determine, but in some cases you can have stuff that is where the funnel is so clear that the attribution to marketing is not really an issue. You could say that someone, I don't know, comes in through some sort of website, goes through some sort of webinar, and then at the other end really takes a step that turns them into a good marketing qualified lead, right? I know the issues with the MQL, but like, let's say they take a transaction, and you can really say, okay, good, they're very close to transaction, I can book that. Coming back to my point, so besides the metrics and the measurements, you need some sellable units. You need something that is sort of that you can sell through a marketing funnel. And when I mean sell, let's take an example. Is what is marketing sourced revenue? I would say if you and I build a campaign for a firm that educates people online, takes them into, let's say, make it a webinar funnel, and at the end of that is a real live, real time discovery workshop, maybe even with money down. Like the client sends some of their people and they pay like a small fee to get into that workshop. And then in that workshop, we sell them a project. I would say that's marketing source when they become an immediate opportunity in your CRM and so forth. Now, like back to your point, a lot of these things don't exist in firms. You could even start with the connection between web forms and CRM. That often doesn't exist. So there's many challenges on the measurement side, but I think the what is the product or what is a low threshold type of thing we could even offer, so we can claim having influenced that. That's another.
Here's the funny thing in that, and I'm happy to discuss this. Like, a lot of these companies are very good at strategy and at integrating systems.
Yeah.
In order to have a good marketing sales connection, your systems need to be integrated. If they're not integrated, then I'm sorry, you're not going to really measure anything that well. It's not even about measurement. Like, if you want to get your sales qualified leads and market qualified leads connected, you need to have a strong sales and marketing pipeline. The pipeline needs to be connected at various integration points. It's not just what essentially happens is you've got multiple threads running in large firms which are all not connected, and you have a lot of cost because people know that they need to take these materials to the market to sell their things because that's what these guys provide. But they also forget that there's the influence aspect, there's the brand aspect, there is the the pipeline aspect, and you can build reputation clearly by connecting yourself with the CXOs. Like, for instance, if you're a company who's just been getting like thought leadership, which has been signed off or commented by known CXOs in multiple other firms, you will find that you've got a reputation that never existed, or other companies will suddenly find that it's hard to compete because they've got all these people talking. That's one way. You don't where you can do it without measuring much, because now you're doing like word of mouth brand exercise and stuff like that.
And to be very clear, all that is very important. It's my fundamental beef with the consultancy marketers is that it is very important, but that doesn't mean you should be putting the basics in place. Yeah. And we often jump straight into the high level thought leadership, the brand stuff and so forth, but you can't even get a simple you don't even get like a simple funnel going to pull people into your events. So like it's sort of it goes awry on the very basic stuff, and then you nail the glossy pieces, which always strikes me so weird. But anyways,
actually, the really interesting thing about that is why a lot of consultancy firms fail at it is because the big consultancies already have reputation, and their reputation comes in through analyst rankings and various other rankings. People immediately look at it and be like, they look at the top 20 in any sector and be like, all right, all these things are good. I know of these top 5, top 10, and I know of these shops with 1 person, 2 people now. Okay, we can get that. We can use that.
Yeah.
But just banking in on your reputation to do marketing is not an effective sales
you
strategy.
Create a lot. That's the point. You create a ton of waste, which brings me back to the growth model ideas. Like to bring back the questions from the beginning, like how fast or what's our growth target and how much does marketing contribute? Even basing your discussions with leadership as a marketer in these or on these terms will sort of immediately just out of the door improve your own reputation because you're starting the conversations that way. And I think if you can do that, pull it off and sort of convince people that actually your liberty to do brand stuff and crazy reputational things and wild card projects actually grows because everybody knows, they know their numbers and they're sort of delivering. Do you know what I mean? Sort of, it even helps with that part because the general feeling is they have their shit together, excuse my English. So yeah, sure, of course I'll do the crazy, I don't know, drone race sponsorship, tennis tournament, whatever it is you want to do in terms of creative brand building things, because they know you can deliver. It's much more visible and transparent what you are trying to deliver for the firm over the year. And I never see it done, it's so interesting to me. And I'm not talking sort of SaaS company level predictable revenue stuff. It's just, here's a feasible target which we will shoot for.
So when you think about it, right, in order to get this working, in order to get this really efficient, you got to think about the fact that consultancies, right, they're not growing in a space that is growing. They're essentially growing in a space that's more or less defined. So if these companies need to grow, they need to have something that butters them up, adds grease or something, so that they can grow by pushing the others or fit into gaps where there are gaps, because there are obviously clearly gaps. It's not like it's completely filled. And marketing should essentially try to identify areas of growth, because marketing works so much in a space that is creating new content, whatever kind of content, be it social, be it like, just one sentence written by some senior leader, be it like an exquisite piece of thought leadership. Marketing's
exquisite one. Nice.
Marketing's always creating stuff. When you create stuff, you're also quite aware of who's reading your stuff and how much has it impacted. If these are things that are already being measured, but they're not being effectively used and to inform future pieces. What essentially happens is, if you want to grow, right? A company's got a growth ambition and growth priorities.
Yeah.
Marketing creates content in these consulting firms to sell existing capabilities.
Yeah.
While completely ignoring that there are capabilities that can grow, there are capabilities where they already have capabilities, but they're just being pushed in another area. Marketing is easy. Marketing can easily pivot to inform by writing their pieces of content, for instance, in a more dissertation thesis kind of way, to indicate, hey guys, these are all the things.
So you're talking about building demand for new stuff. Maybe even if capabilities don't even exist yet, or they're not as mature, but you could still sort of try to sell work, bring in a client, and then build it from there.
Not even creating new demand, filling existing demand with existing capabilities. It's like you have demand, and you have the capability, but your capability is now servicing another demand without realizing that this capability because most consultancies, the large ones, have multiple capabilities. They can easily shift into these areas. It's just that within large organizations, marketing necessarily doesn't like talk.
Yeah. And I mean, going back to this idea of having some ballpark targets on the chart, or have a growth model and understanding how it works, I think it even helps with that, because if I know what my number is, to put it simply, I might have to get creative, and I might have some of those ideas you just referenced, and I will do that. I will get to that because I have the number, which, as I said in the beginning, most consultancy marketers I meet, they are not aware of it. They might know what, let's say, the growth target for the practice is, so many percent, this and that many $1 million, whatever. But they have no clarity around how that translates to their part of the game. And I think once you've established that, you can unlock quite a bit of that creativity and find things like you just mentioned, because you sort of have set the wheels in motion at the highest level. So I want to bounce this off you, because I did some preparation actually for once.
Amazing.
So I dug around a bit, because I told you, I said I think you can build a rough growth model based on some benchmarks.
Yeah.
So the first thing I want to understand is to build a growth model, or the basic question, sorry, is how much of the revenue we'll bring in is driven by stuff like account management, like the teams working with the clients, just expanding existing stuff, right? That's one area. The second thing is net new revenue from sales outreach. Like the partner goes through his Rolodex, calls up his business school alumni, and voila, there's a deal, right? That still happens in some cases. And how much of that is actually sort of campaign-based driven revenue? Where's the needle fall? Does that make sense?
It does, but what you basically just brought to mind is that when you think about like account-based marketing, most of them are trying to grow accounts. That's their purpose, right? And they are also the best people to market to, provided you know what is in your pipeline across multiple areas, because they are closest to the clients. They know what the clients need. Now, the issue is that when you're a disparate organization, you don't necessarily communicate. So the people who are closer to building accounts are the people who are much more tactical, and they don't necessarily know or have a strategic oversight. All they will be able to do is say, when when say an account manager, account director, account lead just comes up and says, "Hey, I need all of this. Do you have material here?" They will then shuffle around, look, and say, "We don't." But what happens is no one captures that there is a demand. Now, if people capture that there is a demand from multiple areas, this informs marketing to pivot an existing piece of content, for instance, to shape it in a way that meets the demand, because of the amount of research these companies do. There's always something there, but they don't know. And therein lies the problem, because by the time these account people get to their leaders, who then get to their industry and sector leaders, it's no longer that relevant, or someone else has gone into that space,
or it's relevant to just that one client, right, who informed the piece, but that is not the same as the entire market. I mean, that's a fair point. So, but again, so if we look at these three buckets, and I fully agree that for most firms the account-based one is the most important, but that said, you need a certain influx of new clients also, even if you're a very mature firm. It's just because you have churn rates and you want to also take on strategic work to sort of develop the firm. So some new business has to come in. But it's interesting to understand, like, so how across these three buckets, how does it work? How much of that growth target we have is net new revenue from new clients, right? Versus accounts we just expand. Okay. That's also a discussion we was having. And then once you get an idea for that, and I've had these discussions with MDs they actually had a very clear understanding. They said, okay, we want to grow 20%. I can easily get 17 through acquisitions and from organic, which would leave, by rule of elimination, about 3-ish% for marketing. Doesn't sound like much, but if you go like after huge enterprise clients in terms of dollar figures, that can be a big number. So I did a bit of digging around, and I found an interesting model by Serious Decisions, a Forrester company. They said, look, if you build a growth model, here's a couple of benchmarks you can use, depending on which market segment you sell to. Like, you sell to enterprise clients, that's what you just described. Usually it's very, very sales driven, because there's not that many logos. There's just 500 Fortune 500 companies, right? So that'll be very sales driven. You probably know all the accounts. You maybe have a relationship. So it's very much this account growth type thing. Their data finds that the benchmark for marketing sourced revenue in these settings usually between 10 and 15%. Like 90% of the stuff that comes in will be done by sales. And now you can look at the budgets you have and the stuff you do to see, does that make sense? They also say, by the way, that about 75% of that total revenue still gets influenced by marketing. That means, you probably play a lot of sales enablement games, not so much of the impress people and bringing these out, because you just need to bring in 10% of the revenue.
I do take one issue with this kind of stuff, and that's nothing to do with any of the work that we do. It's analytics based upon existing data.
That's true. Yeah.
The problem with that is it's looking at how a thing is actually operating right now, which is great, which is what you need to do a current sit rep. But if you want to do in terms of growth, you can't look at what you have, because like if people like these analysts and their results, they came up with like pre-COVID and post-COVID, huge difference, right?
That's a very well made point. But actually, that is also why I like to have these growth model discussions with the business.
I agree with that. Yeah.
Because now we can make that very argument. We can say, look, guys, we need to build a marketing budget, based on the presumption that I have to bring in at least 10% of your growth ambition. So we need that's what informs my budget. But that is if you want average results. That's what you're saying. If you wanted if we wanted to have exceptional results, maybe we should be looking at increasing that contribution to 20%, 30%. I don't know because marketing scales better than sales, right? So the cost of those 10% probably lower than bringing 10% just with outbound sales. Usually.
So the reason why people struggle with this is because it needs to be treated like a science, the way they need to go about it, right? You need to do something called horizon scanning, which is something that is very rarely done in marketing. It is done in business to check trends, but you don't really use this to actually say, what kind of things are people actually looking for that I can sell to them? What's on the horizon? Just because one business leader suddenly comes and tells you that, hey, I want this because I know I can sell them this.
I sold this once, so now it's a product.
Like, what? Yeah, I sold this once, now it's a product. I know.
That's not product market fit, my friend. Yeah, I get it. That's a huge problem. You're right.
Yeah, that's one problem. But the other problem is that a lot of these people, right? A lot of these people who actually can see where the market's pivoting, where the market's going, they are very few in number. And very few of them actually have a voice. Actually, you and I both know one person who's got a very capable voice and who looks at the market and tries to get shit done. Yeah. But those people are quite rare.
Yeah.
Those people in general are so rare that they don't make that like unicorns.
Or sometimes they sit in weird positions. Like they might sit in a research organization of a larger firm where they get paid to deliver data to the practice or for thought leadership stuff, but there's sort of an internal service function, right? Their capability doesn't get tapped for what you're describing. They are being used in different ways. That is, I see that very often. Like the trend scouts and the smart guys sort of doing grunt work, crunching the numbers to support.
So the way I look at it, right, just to get on this model, is if you want to have growth, you need a horizon scanning function. And this function is what is essentially driving growth. This is the top thing. This is the top level stuff.
Yeah, because identify where the puck is going to be, right, as they say.
Yes. So they would have we have like organizations outside who do some of it for industries, but they don't really look at how can you market any of these things later.
I mean, I love the horizon scanning thing, and you make a valid point about. I think what's also in there is you have to invest in these types of things to keep the growth going. Yeah. I wanted, however, to just finish up my benchmarking stuff for the people if they have to pull off a back of the napkin type growth model thing. So to reiterate, if you sell high ticket stuff to a small market, enterprise services, whatever, and it's your growth model is primarily sales driven, marketing will contribute 10%-ish to it. That would be you might be in that number. If you sell sort of mid-market stuff to smaller companies, those mid-size sort of deal values, that number goes up to, according to Forrester's data set here, to 15 to 25% contribution. And then if you sell almost like self-service stuff to smaller clients, where you can have almost like a highly, like, it's not an e-commerce play, but you could see people get very late into the deal stage, and then it's fairly easy to sell them on something. Marketing contribution could go up to 30 or 45%. So these would be the rosters, which I think is interesting to think about as you think about your own growth model. Are you in those areas? And then, or do you have to build multiple models? It's also very interesting to think about, because maybe you have a firm that sells all things in all three areas. That could be very realistically the case. And then as you figure these things out and have that conversation with the business, what you then see, and this goes back to your measurement point, if then I combine the results from these discussions and say, okay, let's shoot for an overall contribution, I'm going to make this up, of 25% for our next year's target. You can actually start sanity checking that stuff against your budget. Because if you know, I got to spend $1,500 to bring in one viable opportunity, and we close opportunities as one at a 20%, 30% rate, right? You can do the math. And suddenly you find that marketing budget you've been given is either way too small for the expectation of the 25%, and you've got to get creative, or you might actually find, oh, okay, I can find some money in that stuff, to your point about horizon scanning and looking at stuff that works, and maybe not doing the 15,000 specialist industry point of view, which impresses everyone but sells nothing. Like, you can then go in and streamline the money you've been given to actually deliver upon that target, that's the end of my speech. That is why you should have one. That's the first thing. No, stakeholder management, we said first, but once you have the stakeholders, align with them around that type of metric to say, how heavy a lift should my team do here? And that immediately, I found that just by having these kinds of questions, you're almost immediately given a seat at the strategy table, because you're discussing dollar numbers in the end here, which is very, very different from, to exaggerate the point, the colors of the banners that go in your trade booth, right? You're playing in a different league now.
So,
and I think that's the end of my preaching for today. I don't know.
Preaching to the choir, dude.
Figure out a goddamn growth model.
Got it. I think we've got like a really good story here for you people, because trust us, you do need to focus on this growth, but don't forget that this growth matches your own growth as well. So you got those two elements there.
Ooh, nice. That was the perfect ending, my friend. I'll just stop the recording here.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to Unbillable Hours. If you want more, tune in next week. You know where to find us.